Welcome back to another episode of the React Native Radio Podcast. Episode 304, React Navigation version 7 with Satyajit Sahu.
Hey everybody, I'm Jamin Holmgren, your host and friendly CTO of Infinite Red. None of my co-hosts are with me today. They left me all alone in the studio, just sitting here all by my lonesome. It's not true. I actually have an amazing guest with me today. Satya, can you introduce yourself?
Hello everyone. I'm Satyajit Sahu and I'm a maintainer of React Navigation. And I'm very excited to be on this podcast today. And hello again.
Yeah, I really appreciate you. We've known each other for a few years now, I think, something like that. Of course, I've always followed your work. You do a lot of amazing work in the React Native ecosystem. And of course, React Navigation is a huge deal. So I want to get into all of those things. I have a ton of questions for you. Before we get into our topic, I do want to remind the audience that this episode is sponsored by Infinite Red. Infinite Red is a premier React Native development agency located fully remote in the US. If you're looking for React Native expertise and more velocity for your next project, hey, that's a new part of my script here. Hit us up at infinite.red/React Native. Don't forget to mention that you heard about us through the React Native Radio Podcast. All right, let's talk about React Navigation version 7, which as of this recording is not yet fully released. I assume at some point it'll be released. We'll get into that. Before we get into the main changes with version 7, I want to first, for those, there may be people in the audience who actually don't know what React Navigation is, as funny as that is, because it's so embedded into our industry. So can you give sort of the elevator pitch of what React Navigation is, just like in general?
Well, it's a difficult thing to say because not every, people don't usually ask this. But yeah, basically React Navigation is a navigation library. If you're coming from the web, you probably know React Router, which is a routing library. But React Navigation is not a routing library per se. The difference is, on React Router, it provides you with the logic. It provides you integration with the URLs. It provides you the logic to handle your views. But in the end, you are the one building all of the animations or any views, transitions, whatever you have, right? So React Navigation builds upon that idea. It provides you the logic. In addition, it also provides you the UI to mimic how native apps have their UI setup, how native apps behave, because native apps have a lot of different kind of navigation, as in like moving from screen to screen, right? They have like tabs, drawer, they have like stack navigation, which is like just, screens on top of each other. So React Navigation provides all that. It handles all of the logic. It handles all of the UI. It handles all of the animations for you. So that means if you're building a mobile app, these things are very important. And with React Navigation, you don't need to build it again and again for every app.
That is a great explanation. And I remember when React Navigation came into the scene, because we were using other things, React Native, Router Flux, and some other older libraries. And it was a big deal when it came in. Now, one of the questions we get is, why is it called React Navigation, not React Native Navigation? Can you use it with React as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. And you can totally. The core of React Navigation, at least when React Navigation was added initially, it did not have this structure. But in React Navigation 4, I think, I don't remember which version it was, we split it into multiple packages like React Navigation Core, then React Navigation Native, and we still have the same structure. So React Navigation Core is just logic. It's only JavaScript, pure JavaScript. There is no platform-specific APIs, no React Native APIs, no web APIs. It's pure JavaScript logic. So you can take that. You can write like a web-based navigation library on top of that. Fun fact, there is actually a library for native script using React Navigation, and Yeah, so you can use React Navigation native script, even if it doesn't have anything to do with React Native.
That's really cool. So you've abstracted it to the point where it is a kind of a general purpose navigation library, and then it can be used in different contexts. I love that. So I really want to get into version 7. One of the things that I think is the coolest thing that I've seen about version 7, it's not released yet as of this, recording, but it may be very soon. It brings back from version 3, which you mentioned, the static configuration API, but it doesn't like totally roll back to it. It brings it in kind of a smart way with all of the learnings of the years in between and how people use it. So I want to know, what was sort of the main motivation between bringing back the static configuration API, and then, how does that compare to like the dynamic API that was introduced in version 5 and 6?
Maybe first I should say like why we brought the dynamic API, so we can understand the motivation of the whole thing, right? So when React Navigation was initially there, React Navigation version 2, 3, 1, those versions, they had a static API. And the problem with that, it was very limited. You could not do a lot of things. Like if you have some advanced use cases, let's say you fetch a list of categories from the server, you want to show it in tabs, right? A lot of like food ordering apps do that, where they have like a list of categories as tabs that you can swipe between. So those kind of UI, you could not really do that with the static API. And it was not just API. It was like the limitation of the whole design of how things are built. You could not even have a workaround to do that. In React Navigation 5, we wanted to support these advanced use cases. So we took that, we rewrote it to a new dynamic API to make all of this possible. So it brought a lot of flexibility, but it also brought problems. So one of the biggest problem is with static API, all of the navigation tree is static, so we can easily traverse all of the screens. We can see all of the screens at once, which makes it easy to let's say do deep links, TypeScript types, all of those things, which are very easy to do with static config. I mean, those are not the only things. Like in the future, maybe we'll have like data fetching or things like that. They need everything to be static. So there is a lot of popularity with Expo Router or Next.js, right? They have a file system API. And while the file system API is convenient, like that's not the only reason. By having a file system API, what they can do, they can statically look at all of the screens in the app. They can statically define whatever data fetching methods there are, which makes it very easy to do advanced logic that is managed for you. So you do not have to implement everything by yourself. So in React Navigation 5 or currently React Navigation 6, a lot of people had this problem of types. Because it was not static, everything has to be defined separately and manually, which can be error prone, and we cannot really guarantee it because React is runtime. The navigation tree will be fully runtime. There is no build time guarantee that it is correct. So that is one of the problems we wanted to solve. And to be honest, that problem was not really solved with the old version of React Navigation. Because I think like back then TypeScript was not as popular. Not everything was written with TypeScript in mind, right? Now it's like essential. I don't think I can code with that. If there is no TypeScript, I cannot code. That's how it is.
Right, exactly.
So it is very important to have TypeScript. We wrote React Navigation 5 with like TypeScript. So yeah, that's something we wanted to really solve. But again, we did not want to lose the features that React Navigation 5 gave us, right? All of the dynamic stuff that gave us. And another thing we had to consider that, okay, so we have static API and we have dynamic API. Now, obviously, I think it is easier for people to use the static API because then they will have like easier deep links, easier types. But again, if somebody already has an app with some dynamic API, or if they want only like one navigator to be dynamic, we want to support that. We want to make it possible to combine these two things. So that was another consideration. So we can combine dynamic and static API together, and we can use it together because they are the same library in the end. They are just different APIs of the same library, and it would be very weird if they did not interact with each other, right? I think with the static API, we can handle a lot of things. We can handle type generation. It doesn't give you the full possibility of what the manual typing can do, but it will handle like most of the types in the app. Occasionally, you might need to write your own type to say, for example, you have very navigator specific operations that you want to do. In that case, you might need to do your own type. But for most of the people, everything will be handled, which is great, I think, because for new people who are starting with React Native, this is a challenging topic, right? And handling all of that is really important. And then the other thing, apart from type generation, is deep link. So deep linking can be a lot of struggle,
Yeah,
because,
it's difficult. Yeah.
yeah, there is a lot of factors to take in, and again, it has to be manual with React Navigation 5. So you have to have the same structure as the navigation tree, which can, go out of date, and it could be a problem. So that is another thing we wanted to, take care of. Another thing we wanted to do is also, automatic deep linking. Of course, I don't believe that every screen should be always deep linked. I believe that people should have the ability to say, okay, I don't want this screen in the deep link, right? So, and we don't want everything to be auto-generated.
Right.
Because, you might not like what is auto-generated. You might want to do your own thing. So that was another thing we wanted to handle, but we wanted to do it in such a way it provides you the flexibility. We handle auto-generation of the types, deep links for all of the screens, but you can go into that. You can say, okay, I don't want deep link for this screen, or I want the deep link for this screen to look different. So yeah, but in the end, a lot of the heavy part is automatically handled for you, which makes it very easy in the end.
That makes a lot of sense. And those are kind of like the biggest features that are coming in with this. Really, what it sounds like you're doing is you're trying to preserve the developer experience and of having, a lot of this stuff kind of handled for you, but with escape hatches. So you have these abilities to opt into, I want to handle this myself. I want to do things myself. I understand the trade-offs. I'm going to go this direction, rather than sort of forcing them in one direction. And it's kind of funny because a lot of times when you're building a navigation library, here's a good example. Authentication. Authentication is kind of a special case in some ways, like the authentication flows. And you often really, you do that stuff up front, but then it doesn't really affect things after that too much. But it's still a special case. It's like a certain way where you're replacing the whole stack, or maybe you have the ability to go look at certain screens, but you can't look at others. And, it's a whole thing. So I think it's very interesting in version 7 how you've introduced the new if, I don't know, what do you call it, operator or whatever, that essentially allows you to add a conditional into routes that are connected to a React hook, which is very cool. Like a React hook that returns a Boolean, and that hook then controls whether that screen is mounted or not. So walk me through that a little bit, like navigation flows and why you decided to go this direction with this sort of an API, and what sort of the advantages of this are.
Yeah, the main idea behind that is we don't want to lose functionality, because just because we have a static API, what we want to do is make things simpler for people, but making things simpler should not mean that we lose what we could already do, right? So that is the main reason why we have this if condition, because authentication is a special case, but it's a very important case. Like most apps have authentication, right? Unless like it's I think like most apps I use do have authentication, so it's a very important case to handle. So that's why we came up with this idea. I mean, I think it's a pretty cool way to do that. I haven't actually seen anybody do this where they take a hook as a option and conditionally, or based on the return type they do things. But yeah, I think to answer your question, why we did that is to preserve the functionality you could already do and not have to learn a totally different way of doing things for authentication. If you go to the React Navigation documentation now, in the version 7 documentation, we'll have like static and dynamic API examples side by side, but most of the documentation stays the same. Of course, like sometimes things will be like different because they are named different, or like the API looks a bit different, but most of the concepts needs to stay the same. That's the really main goal. We want the concepts to be the exact same. We don't want to like have to learn a different way of doing things.
I want to ask you about the implications beyond the API. Are there any performance implications? Is it faster? Is it about the same? Is it slower than version 7? Like, are there any performance implications?
I think it should be about the same, but there are like some small optimizations we can make. I think I have made like a small optimization. Obviously, I haven't measured that, but yeah. But I think it should be exactly the same or tiny bit better, but do not expect anything.
Totally, yeah. I mean, as long as it's pretty similar, I don't see there being an issue. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about Expo Router for a second, because Expo, obviously, Evan Bacon kind of putting out the router. It's built on top of React Navigation, which is cool. Do you think that the new static API might impact something like Expo Router? Have you talked with Evan about what he's doing over there? Is there any collaboration happening, that sort of thing?
Well, I have asked Evan to test out React Navigation 7, but they have a lot to do right now because I think Evan doesn't sleep and he's working all the time.
I believe it.
Yeah, I have seen it. I mean, I haven't seen it, but I have had meetings with him like early in the morning, like how.
Yeah.
Like
totally
he didn't
true.
sleep all night. But I have talked to him about trying out React Navigation 7 because there have been a lot of changes apart from the API internally, and we want to make sure that Expo Router doesn't break up because of the changes. So that's all we have for now. He hasn't given me any feedback yet.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, I think it should not really impact much. There are some fundamental differences on how like Navigate works, for example. Those will be impacted, but I think like in the end, the changes behave more like a web and more like how Expo Router wants them to behave. So that should be good. So yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, obviously it's built on top of React Navigation. Expo Router is, and since you're maintaining backwards compatibility, you are, right? Like, let me verify that. How backwards compatible is it?
There are some breaking changes. We changed how Navigate works because I think the way Navigate worked before was not good. At least that's not how I would expect it to work. And I saw a lot of times that people did not expect it to work that way. So we changed how Navigate works, and it is more like web now. So previously, if you navigate multiple times, it would stay on the same screen, right? So we changed that a bit. So if you're already on the screen, it will stay on the screen. But if you're actually in a different screen and you navigate to another screen, previously what would happen if that screen was already in the stack, it would go back to previous screen.
Oh,
So
I see.
yeah, now
Instead of
it
pushing
wouldn't
on a
do
new
that.
one,
Yeah, so now it wouldn't do that. It would push a new screen, which
a
I
new
think,
version of that screen or a new
yeah,
instance of that screen. Yeah.
yeah. I think it's like more intuitive, and the biggest thing is that's how it works on the web. If you are
Yeah.
already
Right.
on a URL, you can push the same URL again. It's gonna stay there, or like click a link with the same URL, it's gonna stay there. But it doesn't go back in the stack on the web. So
Right.
we try to follow a similar approach, so it's less confusing and more intuitive. And even with that, we have navigate deprecated. So if you're upgrading to React Navigation 7, you can just replace all of the navigate with navigate deprecated. That way your current code should stay working, and you can move to the new navigate behavior one by one without breaking everything and having to test everything at once. So yeah, I want to try to minimize the impact as much as I can. And the other changes are very I would say small changes. There are not a lot of big changes that would cause issues for most people. Mostly improvements. For example, one of the changes we made, draw navigation, we removed the reanimated implementation on the web.
Okay.
So now on the web, when you use draw, it's using CSS transitions. So that means it's more performant. We are not loading a additional library on the web, so bundle size is smaller on the web. So yeah, I think most of the changes should not impact a lot of people, or at least should have a positive impact.
Totally makes sense. Yeah. That's awesome, and it sort of reflects in some ways the general shift toward convergence between the web and mobile, at least within the React Native ecosystem, where it feels like we're learning from each other and we're trying to align more APIs and more user expectations and things like that. I think that's very exciting. Now, this is kind of a little bit of a niche question. One of my engineers mentioned hitting some. We use MobX, or in particular MobX state tree, to wrap screens and components with an observer higher order component. And one of my engineers mentioned hitting some issues with MobX observers in screens when trying an earlier alpha of version 7. I think this was actually pretty early on. Do you know if there have been any fixes or improvements in that area to support observer higher order components?
I did not even hear about it, so I have no idea. And I cannot imagine why it would cause an issue, because there is one thing in React Native 7 that we try to be do things the React way as much as possible. There was some hacks that is in the React Native 6 version, and we have refactored many things to be as React as possible. At least I don't know there are any things that deviate from how React wants us to do things. Yeah, I cannot think why it would break, but if there is I have seen some kind of issues with MobX and its users with React Native Tab View, for example, when I was mentioning that, because I think the reason it worked like that is because MobX tracks the updates when you access a property, right? So
Yeah.
maybe something related to that could be, if there is a example, I am very curious to look at that.
Yeah, and the fix was pretty quick. He just simply had a wrapper screen and then a screen inside of it, and that was fine. That was wrapped in Observer. But yeah, that's something we could probably provide to you. I don't know if it also affects, for example, Legend State, which also uses an Observer higher order component. MobX does have some potential issues with React Compiler, and where Legend State does not have those same issues. It's just because of the API and how it works. So we have a little bit of thinking to do around MobX and MobX state tree to see how we intend to kind of move into the new React Compiler era. So we're kind of winding down to the end here. I do have a question. What beyond the static API and all the cool stuff that you get there, I noticed you're bringing in some other features too. What other new features are you kind of excited about with version 7? I noticed that there's a new button component that you had talked about a while back. Tab bars can now be animated. There's a layout prop. Is there anything there that's really interesting to you?
Well, I mean, the biggest things are, of course, the static API, automatic deep linking, and types. But I think there are a lot of like small new features. I think one of the biggest ones would be preloading screens. So in new version of React Navigation, you can preload a screen before navigating to it. So let's say you have a stack and you might have a heavy screen, right? Or maybe you have some data fetching or something you need to do, and it takes some time, and you will be going to that screen, right? So with React Navigation 7, you can say navigation preload the screen, and it will render in the background, so it will learn all of the effects or data fetching or what you have. And then when you navigate to it, it's gonna just bring back that screen to the front. So that way, it should be fast and should be more responsive. I think it's like similar to how Next.js preloads the screens on, like, say, hovering the link, or they have some strategy to do it automatically. We don't have any automatic way to do it yet, but you could build on top of that. You could do it automatically yourself, but now you have this ability to do it. It's not supported in native stack right now, but we're talking to React Native Screens developers. We're talking how to implement that, so hopefully it will also be in native stack soon. Not sure if it will be there at the release. Eventually it should be there, so we'll see. And of course there are other changes, like the design of all of the UI elements. We are moving them to new metal design, because when we wrote React Navigation 5 or 6, it had metal design 2, I think. They have so many versions. I'm lost.
Yeah.
But I think right now it's 3. So, or metal U, they call it. So we're redesigning the components to match the new metal design. That means React Native Screens is also gonna have some cool features, like, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it.
Breaking news.
But React Native Screens is also adding large title on Android. You have large title on iOS, right? So we'll also have it on Android, which will be pretty cool, because I think a lot of people want that on Android. And there is also bottom sheet, which React Native Screens is working. We already have models, right? But bottom sheet will be multiple levels, like not only at the top, but you have like breakpoints, and it will be like, like a bottom sheet, but it's not JavaScript based, it's native. So that's something also React Native Screens developers are working on. So I'm excited for that. But yeah, you can go to our documentation and look at all of the features. And yeah, I think like there are still some updates that are needed, but most of them should be up to date. And other than that, there is another thing I'm really excited about, or like, probably most people are not, but I'm excited about it. And it's not a new feature, it's mostly about our documentation, because we have improved our documentation a lot on how we structure things. And now we have the ability to embed playgrounds very easily. Right now there are no playgrounds. We have like a code snippet, we generate a Snack link, you click it and you go to Snack. But we have the ability to embed a Snack. We have the ability to do a lot more. And as part of that, what we also did, we added Snack examples for a lot of more code snippets, because previously how it worked, for every code snippet that we had in the documentation, there will be another file that we would create. That file would have like the full implementation of the code. So we have this code snippet in the documentation, separate code snippet in the file. So that would be used for Snack. And then, since there are two different files, you have to remember, if you edit this, you have to edit that. So yeah, not very maintainable and messy. And again, it's also not very easy to work with. Say I'm writing the documentation, I'm in the flow in the document, I don't want to go to a separate files, like write a different example. That takes me out of the flow of writing the documentation. So what we have done in the new documentation is set up it in such a way that you can write it directly in the Markdown. We will like extract that. We will make a snack automatically. So yeah, that's I'm excited about. I think that means we should have more examples that people can play with. We should have like more interactive stuff and more dynamic stuff in the future.
This is all super awesome, Satya. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, as well as all of the amazing work that you're doing. I know that we appreciate it here at Infinite Red. When I asked internally about version 7, there's some people that are very excited about it, that think it's a really good direction. You probably don't hear this feedback, so I want to let you know that. And of course, thank you from all of us. We do use it, every day at Infinite Red. And I know many of our listeners use React Navigation, and you and the rest of the team there at React Navigation are doing fantastic work. So where can people follow you online to kind of follow your progress with version 7 and anything in the future?
Thank you, man. Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter because I'm always there. Or you can follow me on GitHub, I guess. But you can follow me as Satya164, Satya 164. That's my handle everywhere, GitHub, Twitter. So you can just follow me there.
Perfect. Yeah, and I do recommend it. He posts some really cool like sneak peeks of stuff, and you'll get some really nice technical content. It's the best. Thank you so much. That's it for this episode. Of course, everybody, please do click that subscribe button. Let us know on Twitter. Of course, you can follow React Native Radio, React Native RDIO. I'm Jamin Holmgren. We'll see you all next time.
As always, thanks to our production team, with editor Todd Worth, our assistant editor, this guy, Jed Bartosky, our director of communications and episode release coordinator, Justin Husky, and our guest coordinator, Derek Greenberg. Our producer and host is Jamin Holmgren, and executive producers and hosts are Robin Hines and Mazen Chami. Thanks to our sponsor, Infinite Red. Check us out at infinite.red/React Native. A special thanks to all of you listening today. Make sure to subscribe to React Native Radio wherever you get your podcasts. And leave us a review. We'd love to hear what you think.